Hello! Today we are going to make scallion chicken meatballs. And for that you're going to need ground chicken breast. I'm going to make 2 pounds, but this recipe scales easily up or down. So you need ground chicken breast, 1 pound of ground chicken breast. You're going to need about 8 black peppercorns. You'll need 2 teaspoons of coriander. We're going to need about 4 tablespoons of sesame oil. We're going to use a cup of mirin. If you don't have mirin, you can use some white wine, and you can add a little extra sugar. So don't worry if you can't find mirin. You're going to use 1 cup of soy sauce. I'm using tamari just because it's gluten-free, but you can use any soy sauce. Just make sure you have 1 cup. We're going to use 1 cup of water. So we've got 1 to 1 to 1 for all our liquids. We're going to use a half a cup of white sugar. We're going to use a half a cup of dark brown sugar. We're going to use 2 eggs. So that's 1 egg per pound of chicken that you have. We're going to use about 1/4 cup of grated ginger. And then lastly, we're going to use our scallions. They're the star of our show. These happen to be rather small scallions. So we're, instead of using what I would typically use as 4, I'm going to use about 6 per pound. You can use some more. I'm going to use all of this because aside from what's going into the scallion, into the meatballs themselves, we're going to also garnish with some scallions. So let's get started. Okay, so let's get started on our sauce. So we're going to put our saucepan on a medium-high heat. Turn our fan on to be safe. We've got a cup of water. We've got our cup of soy sauce. So this is all even. So if you want to, even measurements. So if you want to scale this up or down, just make sure all your liquids are an even measure. This is our mirin. We've got half a cup of white sugar. We've got our cup of brown sugar. It's a lot of sugar, but that's what's going to help it become kind of syrupy. We've got about 8 or so black peppercorns. We're going to put in our coriander. So we're going to take the top off. We're going to use 2 teaspoons. If you put a little bit more, it's okay. It's not the end of the world. All right, so we've got our coriander, and then lastly, we're going to add in our freshly grated ginger. And because it's freshly grated, I don't need that much. You can use powdered ginger, you're just not going to get the same wonderful ginger punch that you get from fresh ginger. So what we're doing now is we're going to let this come up to a boil. We want the sugars to melt, to dissolve into our liquids, and we want to be able to reduce this by half. So you want to keep it, once it's come up to a boil, you want to bring it down to a simmer, and we're just going to let that go until it's reduced by half. So you can make this a day ahead of time, and you can use it on the day that you want to make your meatballs, or you can freeze it and just pull it out whenever you need it, or you can use it for any rice dish that you think wants a nice sweet punch that also has a bit of saltiness in it, and then we get that from the soy sauce. So I'm gonna stir this just to help melt the sugars. And as I said, once it comes up to a boil, we're going to let it come down to a simmer and let that reduce by half. And the way that I know it's reduced by half, You notice when I stirred it, I got a little bit of residue, if you will, on my pot. I just kind of make a visual marker. Sometimes I use the rivet as my my marker, and I kind of say, okay, it's about up to here, and I'll look for it when it's, you know, this marker has doubled or tripled in size, depending on what it is I'm doing. The other way that we're going to know that this has reduced enough is we're going to put in a metal spoon, and with the metal spoon, when you put it into the liquid and you run your finger through it, you'll see that it leaves a streak, and that's how we'll know it has reduced enough. So I'm going to keep stirring this just for a couple minutes, like I said, until the sugars have dissolved, and then we're going to get started on making our meatballs. All right, so our sauce is going. We've chopped up our scallions, as you can see. We're going to add 1 egg per pound to the chicken that we've put in our bowl. This is our mixing bowl. So there's 1 egg. And our second egg. All right, now we're going to add our soy sauce. This is going to give us the saltiness that we need and that umami flavor that you get from soy. So we're going to put 2 tablespoons per pound, so a total of 4 tablespoons. You can cut back a little bit, which is what I'm going to do. I'm actually only going to put 3 because I find that to be salty enough for what I'm doing. I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of Japanese sesame oil. This is very pungent. So there's 1, 2, and 3. Okay, sesame oil needs to stay in a dark place. So it's going to go back in the cabinet once I'm done in the pantry. I'm going to take about just over half of the scallions that we chopped up, add them in. Right, so get our scallions. I'm going to use the rest for garnish. And it's that simple. Now all we're going to do, I use a wooden spoon. I break up the eggs a little bit off to the side here. And the only fat that's in here is that sesame oil that we've put in. So we just want to get this to combine. So use your spoon. You can use your hand if you'd like. When it comes to chicken, I like to just use a spoon. It comes together very quickly. You just want to make sure all the chicken is broken up and incorporated. And then we're going to form this into meatballs. So we're just going to stir this and make sure all of the chicken is incorporated really well with the eggs and the scallions and the soy and the sesame oil. All right, time to make meatballs. All right, so we finished forming our meatballs. We got 46 meatballs using the scooper. You can use your hands, you can use a tablespoon, however you want to do it. You can make them bigger if you want. I find that this size is perfect enough to fit on a spoon for the way that I tend to serve these, which is over rice with the sauce. Or you can put a toothpick in them and let people help themselves. What I will tell you though is I bake mine. And the reason I bake them is because these are rather delicate, and trying to get them to brown up in a pan can prove to be a little sad because they'll break up a bit more and you'll have to use a lot of oil. This way, by putting it into the oven and just using the oven heat to cook them through for about I'd say 15 minutes at about 350 degrees. I'm able to just scoop them up. They're not going to look pretty. You'll see when I bring them out. And then I toss them in the sauce itself so that they get the glaze from the sauce. So that way I'm reducing the amount of oil I have to use, but I'm able to still get great flavor. Let's get them in the oven. So you can see your sauce is going to make a lot of bubbles. This is on a low, medium heat. Every so often you want to dissipate those bubbles. It may take a moment. You might find that you have to turn it down a little bit. So I'm just going to go ahead and dissipate all that heat. About 5 to 10 turns here. It'll start to go back down. But this sauce is nearly ready, if not actually ready. We're going to check it in just a moment. I just want to get the majority of those bubbles broken up. There we go. And now I'm going to take I can use it on this spoon. Can you see the glaze that's coming off of there? So if I take my finger and I run it through, do you see the two different sides there? This is ready. So I'm going to turn that off. And when it's time for service, I'm going to go ahead and heat it up if I need to. And you can see the heat is it's still bubbling. So you can make this ahead of time and then just slowly heat it up. You can put it in the microwave. Just keep an eye on it and slowly heat it up. All right, so as you can see, these are done. They are very white. They're very bland in color, but I know that they're done because they cooked for 12 minutes based on their size, but there's also no give really when I push on them a little bit. These were in the top rack, so they got a little bit of browning going on and the liquid around them evaporated, but this is what you can expect to find. Some of the liquid coming out is fine. That's why I said they're not really pretty when they come out. So we're going to get them into a bowl and toss them with our sauce. All right, so here it is. We're going to plate it all up. I put about 1.5 cups of steamed sticky rice in my bowl. I've got my tongs. I'm going to add in probably about 6 or 7 of the meatballs. Just depends on how hungry you are. And because we have that sauce, just make a little well there. We're going to go ahead and put a little bit of sauce on top. You see how thick the sauce has gotten? It's because it's cooled ever so slightly. All right, so we add a little bit more sauce so that our rice has a little bit of sauce on it as well. And then we just garnish with some of our spring onions. So I'd like you to have an opportunity to try this. These are Scallion Chicken Meatballs with a soy ginger glaze. I hope you try it because that's delicious.